Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our moveIT seminar. We are at the halfway point, the third of the five sessions tonight, and this time a session by Wim de Meij. And Wim really appeals to my archaeology heart. He refers to Darwin 1859, the origin of species was born and has been influencing the world, and now we see Wim de Meij using the same theme to influence the testing world. I don't know if he's going to grow his beard as big as Darwin, but at least COVID is helping him a hand in that respect. He will show you why testing should be done also slowly. So brace yourself for a slow ride in the testing landscape. Those who have seen Wim at the CTest conference in Sofia were already convinced of his message. He won the best presentation award over there. Before I hand you over and I hand over the floor to Wim, I would ask you one thing. If you have questions like the other nights, don't forget, just put them in the chat and we'll pick them up and make sure that at the end Wim can answer those questions live for you. Wim, welcome on stage.
Thank you. Dear testing friends, welcome in this session. And the topic of today is a question, is survival of the fittest only for the fastest? And to answer that question, I was looking back on my own career so far as tester. I started in the late 90s, and in that period, testing was easy. It was easy, why? Because you was a manual tester or a manual tester. So there were not a lot of other positions, except maybe the one for a test coordinator of a test manager. And then slowly, after the year 2000, I saw more and more the introduction of test automation in my projects, but at the time that was still okay, because still most of my time I was doing manual testing. And I think that a real game changer was for me, and maybe not for me alone, but for IT in general, was the introduction of DevOps in the year 2008, 2009. Because since then, we manual testers, we were confronted with a lot of strange terms. So here you see a lot of terms related to DevOps. And all of a sudden, we were talking about continuous delivery, continuous integrations, and so on. And it didn't stop anymore. And why not? Because even with the late evolutions like AI, so yeah, it went really, really fast. And what does this mean for us? What does it mean for us manual testers? Do I still have a job tomorrow? Do I still have a job next year? And what about my job within 5 years as a manual tester? And I was very curious about the answer and especially what are trending reports telling about this. And one of the recent world quality reports, if you read the statement, well, that's not so good news for us. Because here you see the statement that if we continue with traditional testing jobs, then we will be outdated. Our job becomes a commodity. And if we don't jump on the new train of AI, data analytics, test automation, we will be out of the market. But is it really like this? Well, I think if we still consider manual testing as executing pre-scripted test cases, just executing repetitive test cases, well, I think that the chance is big that indeed our job will be eaten by automation. And our most dearest manual testing friend, John Doe, he will die within a couple of years. But at the other hand, I'm a very strong believer, and I say firmly, manual testing is not dead. It's not dead at all. And why? Because it's evolving. And if I see this product at the left side of the slide, and if I compare it to my first manual testing, when I started in the late 90s, well, I did testing for the Y2K, and the Y2K testing that was just testing date fields, nothing else. If you see it now today, well, it has become more complex. Landscapes are more complex. Technologies has changed. And even if we can do automation. Maybe in some cases it's not recommended. And to be honest, if I can choose between manual testing or doing an automated test for a smart toilet, well, I'm preferring to still test it in a manual way. And another reason why I say that manual testing is not dead is it's not only about automation. And this post on LinkedIn was very interesting. And indeed, if we are contacted by recruiters, then it seems that we are only talking about very technical jobs. It seems that we only have to do automation, API testing. But like I said before, there are complex products where even if it's possible to automate them technically, maybe it's not worthwhile to do it, or it will be very difficult. And another reason for me why test automation is definitely not always the Wahala is 3 reasons. What I call the automation fake news, the automation paradox, and the automation blindness. What does it mean, the automation fake news? For me, that are typically the promises that are made by tool vendors of big believers of automation towards their stakeholders and management. One of the benefits of automation is, of course, unattended testing. But in some cases, and I made this kind of mistakes in my automation project, especially if you are in a GUI automation project, well then, okay, maybe we forgot that service are restarted overnight. Maybe in an automated GUI test, we forgot that screensavers are popping up, which are breaking our test suite. And more, you see the trend towards code and headless automation. And it's also a trend in development, and the goal is that you can develop complete applications without writing any letter of code. And if you would believe that, then I wonder, okay, why do we have an automation? Why do we have all those kind of frameworks out there? Why do we recommend to apply patterns from development into test automation projects, like object-oriented, like page object models? And the last thing in this area is, especially when you are working with integrated pipelines, the one-click automation. I think that's the dream of every company, to push on a button and starting from your versioning system, deploying the code through all the environments right into the production. Well, I think that we forgot that, okay, we are still not all the Googles and the YouTubes of this world. And especially the last step, the automatic deployment toward our production environment, there I still see a lot of hesitation. The next thing is playing, and especially in an agile world, the automation paradox. One of the things that we aim with working in agile and working in sprints is to speed up the process and try to release as fast as possible. Well, if we need to automate in this sprints, it can be difficult because of course, it's the goal that we start and that we automate whatever that it's developed in sprint 1. But sometimes it's not possible to keep the same pace of development. What means that, of course, in the next sprint, we still need to do some automation from the previous sprint. And then you see for example, at sprint 4, which is typically used to bring everything together, kind of a hardening sprint, there we still need to do some automation from the previous sprint. So we are lagging behind. And even I know that you can apply techniques like test-driven development, behavior-driven development. We can try to keep up the same pace as development. But another thing is that, of course, sprint after sprint, our battery of automated test cases is growing. And that can result that in the last sprint, we still have to do a lot of automation or to run a lot of automated test cases, while at the other hand, we want to release as fast as possible. That's for me the automation paradox. And the last thing about automation, why it's not always Iwahala, is the automation blindness. And here you see an example of an application which is the dream of every automator. And why? It has a lot of parameters, and for each parameter you have a lot of values and a lot of possible data combinations. And that's easy. We script it once, and then we put all those combinations into a CSV file or an Excel file. But are we critical enough? Do we really need to execute, for example, all those 2000 data combinations? Maybe it can be enough that we run and execute only 200 of those combinations. And a technique like pairwise testing can help us at least to reduce those number of data combinations to execute. And another thing in the automation blindness is the reporting. And I have to admit I made this kind of mistakes myself. We have launched our battery of test cases, and at the end a report is coming out, but I didn't really analyze the report in detail. I saw in most of the cases it was green, so for me it was good, but is it really, what does the green mean? Maybe, like you have to do in manual testing, you have to check your expected to check your expected results. Of course, if we forgot to automate some of those validations, then we can have a false positive. And vice versa, if we have a failure, is it really an application failure? Or, as you know, that by writing automation scripts, we are introducing code, we are maybe introducing new errors. It can maybe a failure due to our automation code. And I think it's already clear that survival of the fittest is not only for the fastest. But then the question is, okay, we manual testers, we considered as being the slow testers, how can we survive? How can we adapt us to the new context, to the new normal? And for that, I have 4 messages. And the first message for me is transform to a no-sheep tester. And maybe you're wondered, what is the link between a sheep and a tester? Well, just think at the sound of a bleating sheep. And let us be honest, we manual testers, we are often bleating sheeps. And why we are bleating sheeps? Yeah, we have no decent requirements. Where is my test data? The build is not stable. So we have a lot of valid reasons to complain that we cannot do our work, that we cannot do our job in the ideal situation. But revert it. Revert it and use this disadvantage and turn it in an advantage of an added value as manual tester. And if we don't have decent or very vague requirements, no problem at all. We, manual testers, we can do exploratory testing. We can do session-based testing. If in test automation, if you don't know exactly which buttons to click, which fields to enter, which validations to automate, then we are a little bit clueless. For us, manual testers, having very vague, undocumented things, no problem. Where is my test data? Well, if we don't have the test data prepared by the infra team or the DBA's team, that's not a problem. If we can, you can create your test data yourself, and indirectly it's a good test because by creating the data you need as a prerequisite to execute your test, you test indirectly already your system. Of course, in some cases, it's not always possible. For example, for an SAP system, you need, of course, to have some preloaded master data. And if the build is not stable, well, we have in our plans, we have defined entry and exit criteria. And I know they are not applied a lot, but maybe it's time to become more firm as manual tester and to say, okay, I just do some smoke, some basic sanity test, but I don't jump into my my battery of manual test cases, because often it will end up in a kind of a hurdle race where we just take all the hurdles and we run into problems. So the first message is transform to a no-sheep tester. Second message, cut the crap. And this message is based on one of my favorite albums, which was released in the 80s by The Clash. And the title it was Cut the Crap. And in English, it means, okay, get to the point, no bullshitting, state the real situation. And I think we need to do this more as manual testers towards our stakeholders. I think that still today, that if we report about status, about defects, we are reporting in hard figures, metrics, percentage of outstanding test cases, percentage of severe defects, and so on. But what I propose is that maybe we need to report more emotionally. And like you can see here, that's an example where for the different parts of the application that you report in colors, and easily your stakeholders can see in one view, okay, what are the parts that are working well and what are the parts where we still have some issues. And by applying what I call the business happiness index, you can keep track of, okay, what is the evolution of our stakeholders? Were they happy? And if we see a drop in the index, maybe we can link it back to a release, which was a little bit buggy or something else. Because in the end, and that's why I changed the title from cut to cut the crap, what are the stakeholders interested in? They want to know for their application, okay, first, can I enter some data in the application? And if I can enter some data, can I retrieve my data? Can I do some modifications? Can I do changes? And in some cases, if I need to delete some data, can I do these actions? And those are the main activities. And in that case, if we report more in this way, I think then for stakeholders, then maybe they don't always care, okay, did you execute 100 test cases or did you execute 200 test cases or more? And if we try to define the what I call the cut the crap point, well, it depends of the context, of course. In the left example there, it's an example where you have a one-time ticketing website, where you know, for example, for festival, which knows on before all the tickets will be sold out anyway, well, then you can take a little bit more risk and put less effort in testing. While in the example at the right, while it's in an online home banking where we see more and more the trend to bring people to online home banking, there you cannot afford to lower the quality and to spend less money to testing. So defining the cut the crap point really depends on your context where you are working in. The third message is get your fika, and fika, that's a Swedish tradition. In fact, it's in Sweden. It's a ritual. It's a ritual, and I read about it, and even it seems that in big manufacturing plants of Volvo they apply this. Now, what is it? What is it? Well, fika means that people in the morning and the afternoon they drop their work literally just to go to the coffee corner and to socialize, to talk to each other and to talk about non-professional things. And the reason why they are so believing in this tradition is because they say you can learn a lot of those kind of conversations and use this information. And I think I often said that one of the most dangerous places for testers at all is a coffee corner. And maybe just think at your last defect meeting. Sometimes I have the experience that in such a meeting, not always decisions are taken, and when you come out a meeting, you go to the coffee corner for getting coffee, then discussions are starting, and then the decisions are made. And even as as manual testers, maybe if you are not always invited to such a defect meeting or to such meetings with your stakeholders, it's very important to try to be a fly on the wall and to participate, because it will help you to read the mindset of your stakeholder. Try to understand, okay, why, for example, is the business pushing so hard to go into production while we have still some testing to do, while we have some defects outstanding? Why are, for example, my bugs, why are they not picked up? And why are the discussions about the severity? It can help you to detect and to recognize what are the impediments. And if you really want to use this moment and to apply this moment and to make it more in a professional way, you can apply the technique of lean coffee. And lean coffee, it's a technique from used in Agile. It's about 10 to 50 minutes, where you just list some topics to discuss. You choose in a group which topics you will be discussed, and based on that discussion, some actions can be noted. And that's where we can contribute as manual tester, based on what you feel as your impediments, as problems, to bring it on the table, to do some propositions to solve it, and then to continue back to your work. And I was looking to the most recent World Quality Report, and the second and the third message is completely underlined by the recommendations, because the World Quality Report is stating that it's important not only for testers, but I think for IT projects in general. Try to still read better the business, to listen to the users. What are they caring about? What do they want? How far do they want to go in their quality? And a last message is what I call think globally. And no, it's not a typo. And why think globally? Because, like I said before, we are living in a very complex environment. We are working in very complex projects with a lot of interfaces internally, but also externally. And why we as manual tester in the past, we could do perfectly our job working on one of the components of the landscape. One of our added values is to get that complete view on the complete chain, because in the end it can impact your work as manual tester. And I will illustrate it with two projects I did in the past. One project was an end-to-end testing project for in a telecom project, and we were as tester part of the billing team, and during 2 weeks we couldn't do any tests at all because nothing was coming through. And so we had no clue why, and then we start asking, okay, give us access to the log files. And in the beginning, the infra team, they were a little bit hesitating, but finally they said, okay guys, if you can't do testing, just do your thing, and here are the files. And by analyzing those files, we could pinpoint where was the problem. And for example, we saw that in the interfaces, values were not mapped correctly, mandatory fields were not filled in, and that was explaining the problem why we didn't see any information coming through in the billing system. But another reason why it's important as manual tester really to have that global overview is for test data consistency. And to illustrate that, in a project where we did an implementation of assurance package, at a certain time we had to do a time travel. And this was a very complex exercise because, of course, it's not sufficient that you only look to your own system. You need to know, okay, in the policy system, in the billing system, which data do we need? And we had to set up a change of test cases, and for each test case we had to indicate per day what we need to do in each of those systems. And even application architects, they were not able to help us completely in this exercise because they had a particular view on some of the interfaces, but not on the global view. And that are the things that I strongly believe that we manual testers can definitely show or and prove our added value. And I think that, and maybe if you think that I'm a test automation basher, no, not at all. I think it's not about survival of the fittest for the fastest. I think it's survival of the fittest will be something for the smartest. And it's not only about automation or only about manual testing, it's about the combination. And test automation and manual testing should not be a cat and a dog. We should work together. And if we want to keep our position as manual tester for the future, then think of transform to a no-ship tester. Cut a crap, get a fika from time to time, and don't forget to think globally. Thank you.
Thank you, Wim. Right, we change the slide. Wim, I noted down already one question, which is test automation is scripting. A tester has a human intelligence. A script is stupid. You have to tell it everything. If possible, when, more or less, Wim, when will the artificial intelligence replace the human tester? And you should know it with your specialization in artificial intelligence, Wim.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's indeed a very actual topic, but I don't believe that artificial intelligence will replace the human tester, because I believe that especially due to the very complex environments where we are working, the complex technologies, there will always be cases where you need the human interaction to make decisions, to decide about best techniques to test. And I think that artificial intelligence can be supporting us to make the decision. And for example, in predictive analysis, AI can help us to know what are the parts that we need to retest and function of a release. But I don't believe that it will completely take over the job of a human tester.
Okay, Wim, thank you. The next question is, do you think the tester should be in a team with the business user? Is the fika with the user of the application or the IT team?
Also a good question. I think for me, the ideal combination would be that you as tester, you are in a team where at the one hand, the IT is represented, and on the other hand, the business is represented, and that it's not separated, because I think that business can learn also from IT to understand, okay, why from an IT side we are stressing to test specific parts where maybe the business don't think of. And on the other hand, maybe, and I can illustrate that with an example I had a long time ago, where we had to test something in the salary area, and we had listed the scenarios. And the one day, a business tester was joining us, and we provided the list of scenarios. And half an hour later, we ended up with the triple of number of scenarios we had to test, because just there were so many business complexity where, based on the analysis we didn't thought of, and the business, and that was the area where the business had definitely the added value. While from an IT side, where we support the business in writing down in a pragmatic way the test cases they were doing.
Okay, thank you. I'm still looking if there are more questions coming in. We know that we have a delay between broadcasting and new questions coming in. So I'm gonna take one moment and already announce our next sessions. Coming up next Thursday, Bjorn will bring DevOps Test Alone, an award-winning presentation from Eurostar, which already has seen some other podia in Europe. And Michael will close the series with a session on Forget Quality. For our valued customers, we have after the Forget Quality, which will last about half an hour, we have a Q&A session live with all the presenters on stage. So don't hesitate to come to still register for that one. We will make that an open team session, so all that kind of specialization by the guys will be at your fingertips, ready for an interactive closure somewhere next week on Tuesday evening. So looking if other questions came in. Yes. Do you have ideas for a fika with the corona measurements at this moment, Wim? An actual topic which will probably be the last question to take down, oh, and another one is coming in, but let's concentrate on corona fika.
Yeah, the corona fika, well, I think today it's all about meetings online, and I think the best thing is to set up an online meeting, but definitely not to talk about anything about project-related stuff. And maybe it can be good that you use those sessions that somebody talks about one of his hobbies. Maybe someone with the holidays before us. Maybe you can do the round table to say, okay, what are the plans for the holiday? How will you celebrate Christmas, New Year? So the really aim of the fika is talk about everything else except business related stuff. And it can help you to detect, okay, what is someone's personal situation. Maybe with this corona thing, maybe some colleagues have it very difficult to work from home because they have to manage the family, the kids, and that can explain why they are not responding directly on your mails.
Okay, thank you, Wim. And I have one other question is, do you make a difference between integration testing and system testing? Do you think integration should have a maximum of automation?
Well, I think if we apply the principles of shift left, you should try to automate as soon as possible. So directly on unit level, on API testing level, that's the place where you need to start with automation and include those automated testing in your pipeline. The more you go to the real application interface and GUI level, the harder it can be to automate application. And then I would still recommend that you do it on system level. Why? Because in the integration level, you have to deal with interfaces, internal, external interfaces, and what's often forgotten is that with external interfaces, some of those interfaces, even if it's for testing reasons, you have to pay for it every time you consult that service. So that's something you have to take in mind, and that can be a reason maybe to scope down what you will automate on an integrated testing level.